Hesitating. There we go. All right. I got to do like 50 Cent or something. My name is Anthony. First, I want to thank everybody for coming out again in the rain. I also want to say that it's really an honor and a privilege to be able to work with such intelligent, hardworking people. I thought both those presentations were really awesome, and I actually learned things from that, which is very, very cool to be able to do. So I'm going to be presenting what I call communezzi. It's kind of just my little cute way of presenting what I believe a socialist economy is going to end up looking like in the future. Okay, so I'm going to start out actually talking about a few facts about the world economy and where things are going right now. Then I'm going to talk about theories that are going to allow us to actually interpret those facts. And then once we've done that, then we're going to be able to extrapolate into the future and say, where do we think things are going? After that, I'm going to talk about some possibilities that offers up for us. There's going to be some political implications, and I'm going to leave it off with an idea of how we should actually orient ourselves politically in order to be able to capture the rewards of the changes that happen. The thesis that is going to be developed, just to give you kind of a little orientation before I start going into things, is that under capitalism, in order to produce more surplus and create more profit, capitalists are driven to develop the means of production and to actually limit human labor so that you actually can produce more goods with fewer people working, right? And so the idea is that under socialism, we're going to actually want to take those means of production and then use those for human good as opposed to capitalist profit. And we're going to see how that kind of functions. So I'm going to start with some facts about the world. First, globalization is nearing completion. The chart you see right here is people in the world with access to the internet. It's growing at about 3% a year. At this current trend, by 2037, 100% of people in the world will have access to the internet. The idea here in defining globalization in this way is that capitalism needs to pull all workers under its yoke, right? You can actually have pre-capitalism existing along with capitalism, and people who are street vendors going out and selling, plantains, in Havana, they don't work for a capitalist. They're not actually producing surplus in the way that people who go to office buildings here do. So by 2037, everybody in the world will essentially be either working for the capitalists, or because they don't actually create surplus, they're doing something else, such as street vending, or we'll talk about later, service industry jobs. So the next thing is that world GDP growth is slowing. This has been happening since at least the 60s. And again, at current trajectory, 2034, we will have no more economic growth. What this means is that the economy is not getting any bigger. And this is per capita, this isn't total, so this actually does take into effect population. The next thing is population growth is itself slowing. So this is the world population growth percentages. And interesting statistic is that in the developed world, in 1950 there were 12 workers for every non-worker. By 2050, that'll be 2-to-1. So literally, if you know 3 people, it'll be your worker friend and somebody who's retired, because the world is getting older, right? So this has already happened predominantly in places like Japan. But it's actually going to continue happening everywhere else, and particularly like the Middle East in the next 50 years is going to actually start graying out. Okay, and so the last thing that we're looking at as just a fact is that the world labor force participation rate is decreasing as well. So labor force participation is different than unemployment. Unemployment means you're actually looking for a job but can't find one. Labor force participation means you're either working or you're not. So people who are not working, you could be retired, you could be handicapped, you could be, you stopped looking for a job because you just don't think you can find one. This is anybody over the age of 15, right? So one of the things that's actually leading this is the aging out. And a lot of people are not working because they're retired. So those are the facts, and now I'm going to talk about some theories. And I'm going to actually breeze through these kind of quickly so that we can get to the sexy part of the talk, which is at the end. And I think maybe a lot of people probably know a lot of these basics. So the first thing that you have to understand is the labor theory of value. The idea here is just that human labor actually creates all value. And this is value in the sense of creating commodities, right? So I know that I value my grandma's hugs. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about value in that sense. My grandma's hugs are not on the market. They are not for sale. The second thing, theoretical construct that we need to look at is the organic composition of capital. And so this is all of the things that get put into motion to develop more surplus, right? And so there are two parts to capital. There is live labor, which is human beings doing the work. And then there's dead labor, or embedded labor, and that's all the machines that you use. And the idea here is that in capitalism, you are consistently developing more and more of the embedded labor, the tools that allow humans to do work. They just get better and better and better, and productivity increases, right? And that's how you actually produce more surplus. So that's the organic composition of capital. The next thing is surplus value. The dark blue here is what I would call the machinery, the means of production. The turquoise-ish color, it looks different on every monitor, I'll call it turquoise, is the live labor. And then the idea is that the white is the surplus you're creating. The key component here is that surplus value is a relation between the unpaid labor that we do and all of the total labor. So capitalists actually create more surplus by getting us to do more work that we're not getting paid for. It's about as easy as it gets. I'll put all these up too in case people like math or geometry. I guess you can look at it later. But the thing is that profit is actually different than surplus, right? Profit is actually the amount of surplus you create divided by the entirety of all of the tools and the labor you use to create it. So they're different, and on the far right, the equation that's the simplest and most important to remember is that the amount of money that you have after the cycle goes through divided by the amount that you put in, right? So that's actually how profit operates. And that's why when I talk about profit, we're looking at the GDP, because GDP is the total growth of the entire economy. You can't actually make a higher profit than like the economy's growing, right? Because how would you make that profit? And so I think people often get confused and they think, oh, well, capitalist profits are at an all-time high, et cetera, et cetera. We're not talking about the same thing. And capitalist profits in regular economics are not the same as Marxist. Okay, so here was one place where actually Marx slipped up, and we're going to correct him. So Marx actually believed that the capitalists, in order to create more surplus and generate more profits, would be continually changing that organic composition of capital, so you had more and more machines and fewer people working. And that's actually true. And that's actually true, and we see it in the labor force participation rates, right? We see fewer and fewer people working as a percentage of the people alive. Now, one of the things is that they're actually being maneuvered into retirement, which is convenient. If they weren't, then they would be unemployed or something else, right? But because they're actually aging out, it's kind of a convenient foil of like, where are these people going? So we have fewer and fewer people working. And then the thing is that Marx actually went to great length to try to show how that would actually lead to the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, right? So I showed that chart about how GDP growth is going down. Profit is actually going down. But here's the interesting kick, is that it's actually not caused by the organic composition of capital changing. It's actually just happening consecutively. And so this equation at the bottom actually shows what is actually the case, which is the organic composition of capital causes profit to actually mirror population growth. So that's why I wanted to show actually the fact that population growth is actually decreasing. And so we see very, very correlated actually the organic composition of capital changing and the rate of profit to fall. But it's actually based on the fact that population is decreasing. And so one of the things that, one of the implications here is that we saw for a long time that actually profits were going up, were actually increasing. And the reason why was because the world population was increasing. Also, capitalism was expanding into new and new territories. And that's why it's important that we realize that globalization is actually going to be over in the next 20 years, because there's no one else to be put into the capitalist machine after that, right? It can't expand anymore. I mean, unless we find Martians that can do labor in a human sense. Okay, so that's it. We got facts and we got theories that actually understand how those things work. So what are the implications here? Well, the first is an end of growth. This is U.S. GDP per capita, and I didn't have time to actually develop, this is from someone else's paper. I didn't actually have time to develop my own fit onto the world data, so I just took their U.S. data. But this pretty much shows that about 2035, around there, our high water mark, growth is going to hit a plateau of about $63,000 per person per year in the United States. Currently, right now, world GDP is $10,000 per person. So that's not a lot of money. It's going to increase, but there's a limit to that growth. I think that one of the things that we need to think about in terms of the economy is a division between basic and luxury goods. There's a guy, Piero Sraffa, who was a non-Marxist socialist, and what he wanted to do was develop an understanding of capitalism not based on the labor theory of value. I think what he ended up doing was developing a system that was almost exactly like it, just went about it in a different way. So the top squares up there, you could consider all of these commodities that are getting produced in the basic economy. And the basic economy, it means that if you actually develop the means of production around it better, then you'll actually grow the economy. Whereas at the bottom you have luxury goods, and luxury goods actually, technological innovation in luxury goods does not grow the economy. And I'll give you an example here of a television, right? We have better and better TVs all the time, but they don't actually grow the economy. And the reason is because watching television in HD doesn't make you a better worker than watching REDTube television, right? So we can make the best TVs there are out there. They can't actually grow the economy. They don't make us produce anymore. Okay. So now what we've seen is that the capitalist profit is actually decreasing. And if you read any of the press, economic press, it's like doom and gloom all over the place. They have no idea why, and they don't know what to do about it. What ends up happening, Marx says in Capital Volume 3, the tendency of the rate of profit to fall leads to overproduction, overpopulation, and then systematic crises, right? And I think that coming out of 2007, we understand that. So what are the capitalists going to do? Well, the first thing is that because surplus, as you remember, was just unpaid labor over all labor, what they're going to do is they're going to come at your wages. They're going to actually increase your unpaid labor. They're going to do that in two ways, either via wages or the lengthening of the working day. So you'll get paid the same amount of money, but you'll be actually working harder. And so it's increased exploitation in that sense. The next is we're going to see, and we are seeing, is a pauperization of the professional class. I don't know, I just kind of came up with that term, but I like it. So we're seeing a hollowing out of what people would call the middle class, what I would actually much more call the professional class. As technology is developing, we need fewer and fewer people doing certain skilled jobs, right? So you have a lot of computer programmers, you have people doing research, things like that. But the middle class is, by the way, still growing, but it's gone global. And so places like University of Pennsylvania, they actually educate a global middle class, right? Because it's actually much cheaper to educate people in other places than the United States. One of the implications we see that, we look at why they're not funding schools, is because they actually don't need educated workers in this country anymore. They don't care what country you're from, right? And it's actually much cheaper to train someone in India. The next one is crises. Capitalists are going to be forced to do all sorts of crazy things, such as speculation, in order to derive profits whenever the profit rate's continually decreasing. So this is what the capitalists are going to do. But we have great opportunities here. Because the means of production have been developed to the point where human labor is being less and less necessary. One of the things we can do is collectively own the robots who are doing all the work. I think that production and distribution need to be controlled by a combination of algorithms and democratic decision making. First of all, if anybody thinks that algorithms don't control production and distribution right now, then you should actually just go Google it. How do shoes get to the Walmart in South Philly? It's not magic. You go buy them, a machine registers that they're out, more get sent. There's a whole supply chain that is all based on algorithms. Actually, how shipping containers on ships get packed is based on the simplex algorithm, and they actually can know exactly where they're putting everything. So they'll know exactly what's what and where it's at. So there's a great opportunity for us. I think this is really the crux of this communetsy idea and why I think that this is kind of an interesting way to think about it. It's because most people sit there and say, well, what am I going to do, right? If machines are doing all the labor, what are humans going to do all day? I think that this gives us a great opportunity to engage in cultural production of luxury goods with equal power and social exchange. So one of the implications of what I showed you before about the basic and the luxury economy is that machines are actually going to be doing all of the work for the basic goods. And we are going to reach a point where actually more investment in that will render us no results, right? That's what that limit to growth meant. It means it doesn't matter if you invest 100% of profits back into developing the economy, it's not going to grow. So what are humans going to be doing? Well, we're actually going to be producing luxury goods. And what do I mean by luxury goods? I mean things like craft beer, things like art, things like music. The way I like to say it is, the things that you're fantasizing about doing all day while you're at work where you don't want to be. That's what you'll be doing, right? While machines are doing all of the shit like taking out the garbage, right? Or cleaning the windows, which I kind of like that. That was cool. And this is another important fact, is like activities that currently aim to reproduce the means of production become goals in themselves, if they're still meaningful for human beings. So here, a great example is education, right? So people, and especially at a university, I'm actually struck how, I guess, materialist in the philosophical sense, not like the consumerist sense, people are, where you talk to people who are college students and they're only in college to get a better job, right? As somebody who actually values like education and knowledge in and of itself, I find that kind of rankles me, and I'll be honest, I actually don't want to work next to people who are just there for a paycheck, because you're going to do a shitty job, I think. I want people who are developing, cancer, drugs to actually want to be there. I don't know, that's my personal preference. But I think that this gives us a great opportunity. And so, yeah, I crossed this out. Communetsy, look, it's just called socialism. I was trying to be cute. And what you see here is exactly what I said before, right? So there's no more, this is all, non-human labor. Human labor is only going to be in luxury goods, and we'll be able to exchange them. So the benefits of actually operating an economy like this, one is that all of our basic needs are met, right? Machines are doing things like 3D printing houses, which the technology already exists. A guy in China actually 3D printed a house. Even healthcare, right? A lot of the healthcare can actually be automated. In Japan, they're in order to deal with their population issues with an aging population, they're actually developing robots because they're like, look, what are we going to do? Like, have more babies? We can't. And that's a pretty twisted, situation in which you're having more babies in order to take care of the old people you already have. So another thing that I think is actually really, really interesting about this is that human mind can actually comprehend craft production in its totality. Like I said before, there's this concept called the fetishization of commodities, where how does a pair of shoes show up at Walmart? Nobody knows, right? Like is this even real leather? Is this synthetic? Like where did it get sewn? Where did it get made? How did it get designed? Somebody actually, product designer designed it. So human beings can actually understand these things. We can understand how to brew beer. We can understand how to grow a tomato, right? Because we want to do that. So I think that another important thing is we're going to free art and craft from a profit motive. Right now, you can only produce music. You can only produce art as your main occupation in life if it actually generates profit for a capitalist. And I think that one of the beautiful aspects of this is that we're going to be engaging in social exchange. So social exchange in which people are actually equal. Right now, under in exchange under capitalism, you're not actually equal, right? A rich person has much more power to actually dictate what music is popular, right? The programmers. And the last thing on this is that we can evenly distribute luxury. Right now, luxury is not evenly distributed. Rich people get access to it, poor people don't, right? But under this, because there's no profit involved, there's no money involved, when I brew my own beer and I exchange it for somebody else who actually created a necklace that I want to give my mom for her birthday, it's actually up to the two of us to decide whether or not that's an equal exchange, right? We're not actually mediating it through money, which I may have more of because I get paid higher wage. So this is the last thing on the benefits. We get to increase the quantity, quality, and variety of cultural goods. And one of the problems with capitalism and producing cultural goods under that is because you have to create profit, you may actually miss out on all sorts of experimental things, such as like music, right? Because if you want to develop something new and take a risk, you're actually not going to do that. Because if the capitalist won't buy it from you, you're out, working at the record store. I don't even know if they have record stores anymore. I haven't bought a CD since the 90s, but I think that this is a great opportunity for us to actually expand that entire aspect and increase human flourishing. So one of the things that we're talking about is we're still going to be doing work because human beings want to do work. That is how we actually interact with the world to create values for ourselves. But we won't be doing the shitty work that we don't want to be doing. So, okay, so that's the vision, and now we're going to talk about practical demands. What are we going to ask for today? The first is that we need open borders, right? Populations are going to be changing all the time. People in England are getting old, right? So we need people from places like Turkey or the Middle East to be able to actually go in and do labor there. If they can't do that, then literally it's actually worse for the capitalists, right? And actually, I read a very interesting thesis, which was that the entirety of the U.S. economic growth in the 90s would have not been possible if we did not have migrant labor coming in from Mexico. Because our population was actually not even replacing itself, already in the United States. The second one is no intellectual property. This doesn't really stem from what I talked about, but I don't like it. I don't like the idea that you can own information. First of all, it's actually not possible. If you know anything about information theory, you can't own a string of ones and zeros unless you just say it so and you have all the guns. So the last thing on this and practical demands is that we need a gradually increasing defined benefits package. And so we talked about this before, guaranteed income, but I think we need to extend that to be healthcare, education, and things like that. One of the things we don't want to do is tie any of this to wages, because wages is just a nominal number, right? You can be paid $11 billion, and that could buy you a hot dog. But actually defined benefits say, no, I get a hot dog, right? I don't care what the price of the hot dog is. I get my stuff. And I think that, I want to talk a little bit, because this is the end, but we could go over, because I don't think anyone's going to kick us out. But I want to talk about some progressive failings here, too, is that there are people who want to find technocratic solutions to these problems. I think that will fail, because what technology does is it actually increases labor productivity. And if what I said was true, then that won't actually help anything, right? So there will not be technocratic solutions. So in San Francisco, these geniuses at Twitter thought that a great way to help solve homelessness was to install little kiosks where homeless people could check and see which shelters had space for the night. Well, that sounds like an interesting idea. I've got a better idea. It's called build more shelters, right? Or build more houses for people. So I think that the technocratic solution is not going to actually get us out of this. I think that the other idea is, like I said, wages. I just want to attack this notion that we're going to somehow legislate that we're going to increase wages, because that will just actually transfer to other middle-class people paying more for things, and actually won't actually attack the underlying problem of capitalist accumulation. So this is essentially it, and I want to leave us off with a political orientation here, because I think that we are entering into a new political sphere. This is the first time, obviously, ever, where we're going to actually have declining world population that I know of. I think it's also going to be the first time where we're going to see capitalism hitting its limits. We can't address these issues from the perspective of exploitation, right? Because as we saw before, exploitation is all just how much are you not paid for how much labor is getting done. And the capitalists are actually kicking us out of the labor force, right? They actually don't, they don't need us, right? So we can't actually sit there and say, well, we're going to seize the means of production that I don't know how to use, right? If the means of production is a Roomba, right? A worker doesn't control it. It controls itself. That's the whole point of it, right? And so we actually need to shift our political orientation to start looking at this new world in which, human beings aren't exploited necessarily, but they are oppressed. And I think that we're seeing this as the main current right now politically with things like Black Lives Matter, right? That's actually a politics of oppression. That's, I don't have access to education. I don't have access to a good job, right? It's not that I'm being exploited at work. That's exactly the opposite problem. As Marx said, the only thing worse than being exploited is not being exploited. And we need to shift this idea, and my vision is that we extend the idea of reparations saying we need to be paid back for things that happened in the past. We extend the idea of reparations to actually include all workers. Because the thing about labor is that you take live labor and you embed it in dead labor, right? So I create a hammer, and now that hammer exists, right? But it was my labor that created that. And everything we see around us was created by human beings, and created by human beings in an exploitative process. So we need to actually develop a moral argument for why we need to seize the means of production and put the robots to collective use. So that's it. I have further reading where you can check it out later, just some stuff I read on these issues. PhillySocialist.org, Facebook.com/PhillySocialist. You can email me personally if you have any questions later or any comments. I take love emails, hate emails, pictures of cats, anything you want to send me. And so